Today's lecture will center on public relations. And before now, we had discussed the concept of public organizations. We traced theories relating to the explanation as to what modern-day public organization is about. We have discussed a range of topics and activities under this heading of public administration, under this course, organization and administrative theory. Our last class was on the issues of bureaucracy and the theoretical and scholarly explanations of what the concept of bureaucracy is about. How Max Weber's principle of bureaucracy is understanding and explanation and the theory guiding what bureaucracy is about in every organization was discussed. The high points of his understanding of bureaucracy, as well as the critiques that were presented in response to his concept of bureaucracy were explained. So in today's lecture, our emphasis will be on public relations. And in conjunction with that, issues such as publicity, trade unions, professional bodies and organizations will be discussed, propaganda and how it differs from public relations, and a whole lot that revolves around the concept of how an organization relates with its external environment, be it as an organization or in one-on-one basis, will be looked at. And the relevance of that to the growth of an organization, the attainment of the objective principles for the establishment of organizations, be it public and private, will be looked at. Relevance of public relations to as such, looking at the whole idea of public administration from the perspective of public relations in just a short while. So having said that, I will be sharing my screen with you so that we'll all be carried along, and then our objective of guiding and understanding of the functionings of administration would be easily carried out. So having said that, it is said that the fundamental purpose of public relations is to establish a two-way flow of mutual understanding based on truth, knowledge, and full information. Public relations involve the deliberate, planned, and sustained effort to establish and maintain mutual understanding between an organization and its public. There's always an understanding that the person has when the concept of public administration or public relations is mentioned. First, the whole concept of it being public tends to showcase the fact that it transcends above some private activities into the domain of societal preferences, where all and sundry are carried along, which means the purpose for anything that is related public revolves from the fact that it tends to showcase how interpersonal relationships take place, either from the public angle to the organization or from the organization to the public angle. So it is more like an effective communication channel that takes place between the organization and what is obtainable in its external environment. So the whole idea of relations from a layman's perspective can be joined together to mean the extent to which organizations relate with its external environment. And the relevance of that will be seen as we make progress in this work. Therefore, the importance of cultivating contacts between the citizens and the administrators need hardly any emphasis, especially in the modern democratic states where the sovereign power rests with the people. The whole idea of the public refers to the people, and the relevance of the people to the functionality and the expertise and the attainment of the goals to which an organization is set up cannot be overemphasized. So the aspect of the communication between the organization and the public, and between the public and the organization, cannot be overemphasized when one discusses issues of the relevance of public relations. So having said that, one would ask, what is public relation in itself? There is a scholarly perspective as to what public relation is about, but we will begin by looking at the Encyclopedia Americana, which defines public relations as the act of analyzing, influencing, and interpreting a person, idea, group of business, so that he or it will be recognized as serving the public interest and will benefit from doing so. So this definition has more of a feedback mechanism involved in it, that there's communication between the organization and the public, and then the public to the organization. And all that revolves around the whole idea of public relations, the smooth communication or the effective back and forth relationship that takes place within an organization with its external environment forms the whole gamut of public administration. According to MC Kami, public relations is government. In government is the composite of all the primary and secondary contacts between the bureaucracy and citizens and all the interactions of influence and attitudes established in this country. So looked at from a holistic perspective, or from a country as the measure of standard in what public relations entails, it can be seen that it relates to the interactions, the influence that comes from a hierarchical arrangement or an organizational setup to its environment, to its people. And then what the people also in turn passes across back to the organization. So from the angle of a country, there are organizations established to man the issues of public relations and the relevance of that to how the effective functioning of the country can be guaranteed. In Nigeria, there are bodies that are charged with relating with the public and at the same time passing the message of the public back to the government to effect the due changes or desired outcomes. So having said that, there's a distinction between public relations and publicity. Like I earlier mentioned, that this topic today will do a lot of comparative analysis between publicity, public relations, propaganda, and we'll also look at the relevance of trade union organizations, professional bodies, as they all relate to the aspect of the functionality of an organization. So public relations and publicity, the two terms public relations and publicity are very often confused with each other. Some governments designate their public relations officers as publicity officers. No doubt the two terms are so intimately intertwined that they are not two different functions, but two aspects of the same thing. According to J.H. Bruber, the difference between public relations and publicity lies in the techniques of their approach. Publicity has been defined as the act of dealing with the people en masse, while public relations deals with the individual. So if you look at it closely, publicity seems to be an aspect of public relations when one looks at it from a holistic perspective. One relates with the entirety of the people, and that is the aspect that publicity comes in. While the other one tends to narrow down to refining the relationship that takes place between the organization, between the government and the individual. So however it is centered around how effective communication is guaranteed within the system or in terms of the functionality of the system, how the public tends to relate or the external environment tends to relate with the organization or with the government in question, and how the government in question equally relates with its external environment. So all that tends to form the whole idea or the background to which public relations thrives. Public relations and propaganda. One important part of public relations, as we have seen above, is publicity. Often, the term publicity is confused with propaganda. The important points of difference between the two are the following. The object of publicity is to disseminate information, while the object of propaganda is to influence conduct. Take note of that statement. The object of publicity is to disseminate information, that is to pass across information to the external environment or to the generality of the people or to the public, as the case may be. While the object of propaganda is to influence conduct. So that is where the aspect of people coming to say certain things that tends to show the superiority of two variables. Propaganda tends to promote the idea of one aspect trying to show superiority or supremacy over other considerations. So they tend to come up with ideas, with influences and agendas that would showcase a particular interest or idea above other ideas within a competitive arrangement. That is where propaganda stands out. The source of publicity is also known. Why the source of propaganda is often there. Public relations has no bad motive why propaganda seeks to serve its own selfish ends by giving wrong information and distorted facts. So if you look at this closely, you will be able to differentiate between what publicity is, public relations, and what propaganda is. They are all aspects of effective communication between an organization or the country with its external environment. While one looks at the relationship on an interpersonal level, the other one talks about publicity, or talks about relationship with the public in general, or with the external environment in its entirety. And then the other one tends to give preferential recognition to certain attributes that may not necessarily be true, but that would give supremacy or superiority positioning to an idea that may not necessarily be in the public interest, but would show supremacy. And that is where propaganda comes in. So propaganda is simply a message that is communicated to the external environment that tends to elevate an idea or a position above other considerations. And it might not necessarily be true, its source might not necessarily be known, but it tends to project certain aspects that gives more recognition to an idea or to an opinion above other aspects. Countries tend to use this idea of propaganda a lot. Like in cases of war, or in cases of military supremacy or tussle, there's always the aspect of trying to run down the opponent by showing capacity and capability of creating maximum destruction or effect on people, or on the outside of the military of the other country, and as well trying to create fear and increase tension in the possibility of maybe an attack or something. And governments also make use of this propaganda aspect also, to even political parties, to project their interests above other competitors within the confines of the public space. So having said that, public relations officers cannot be allowed to indulge in propaganda. His job is publicity and not propaganda. The people must be supplied with time facts. They should not be misled. However, in war times, government also may indulge in propaganda to counteract enemy propaganda and create low morale among the people and soldiers. This tends to stress the point I was trying to make earlier on, that in as much as the aspect of public relations is fact-specific and to a large extent must conform with adequate information being handed to the public, the aspect of propaganda does not reflect this idea of it must be premised on facts. So governments from time to time, organizations from time to time, or even political parties and interest groups from time to time tend to employ the agenda that is embedded in propaganda to showcase the fact that they are superior to certain interests. And in the event of a competition or an attack or in a war situation, they can use propaganda to create low morale amongst the people and soldiers of enemy states, and also enemy interests or opposing views. So in other words, propaganda is a machinery for showcasing superiority in case of a context between opposing views. Public relations and propaganda. One important part of public relations, as we have seen above, is publicity. Often the term publicity is confused with propaganda. The important point of difference between the two are the following. The object of publicity is to disseminate information, while the object of propaganda is to influence conduct. So the relevance of these concepts cannot be overemphasized when one talks of relationship with an organization, with a country, in terms of its external environment. Another angle to this is the source of publicity is always known, while the source of propaganda is often veiled. Public relations has no bad motive, while propaganda seeks to serve its own selfish interest. And that is, I bet, the defining point in this comparison of publicity, public relations, and propaganda. So elements of public relations. According to Millet, public relations consist of 4 elements. Learning about people's desires and aspirations is one. Advising the public is another. Cultivating the satisfactory contact between the public and officials is another. Informing the public about what government is doing. So when you look at this closely, you tend to see the high points or the boundaries through which public relations operate. First is that It learns people's desires and aspirations as to what is expected of them from the government. And it also plays the role of advising the public or communicating to the public the ideas or the policies and principles of government or programs of government that would be in the overall interest of all and sundry. And another point is that it cultivates satisfactory contact between public and officials. So the machinery or the mechanism of public relations is a tool for effective communication, and the oil that tends to smoothen the wheel of operation of the government, and in terms of the reception or the extent to which the acceptability of it from the public domain is guaranteed. So there must be effective communication from the angle of public relations for the smooth running of an organization or for the effective functioning of a government, because the opinion of the people to a large extent matters and forms the idea that revolves around the extent of the communications that take place within the public spheres. So it also plays the role of informing the public about what government is doing. So to a large extent, policies of government and programs of government are communicated to the public through the instrumentality of public relations and agencies and organizations of government that are saddled with this responsibility of communicating government policies and programs to the public. So those are all ideas built around the notion of public relations. The publicity function of the government of Nigeria has been given to the Ministry of Information and the National Orientation Agency. The ministry does its job through the following important agencies: Radio Nigeria of Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria, the Press Information Bureau, Publication Division, Directorate of Advertising and Visual Publicity, Film Censor Division, National Orientation Agency. These are organizations of government that are charged with the aspect of communicating government policies and programs to the public. And remember, there is always a feedback aspect that these organizations also play. They get information from the public and pass the same to the government in the interest of the generality of all and sundry. Their role also helps to sustain the role of the government and the aspect of effective functioning of government policies and programs as well. So, having said that, there are obstacles to public relations as well. In as much as we understand that every concept in management and in social sciences has its strong points, there are also challenges or critiques of these ideas as well. So the complexity of modern management is one of the major obstacles of public relations. This tends to show the fact that because there is a range of interests and aggregate demand, and then the extent of the complexity and the burgeoning demands of government, of the public, of the external environment to government, they tend to be, to a large extent, a struggle in terms of the explanation or the projection of the views and programs of government from this angle. So this has become an obstacle to the effective functioning of public relations within the confines of government discussions and functioning. Another high point is that the usually indifferent attitude of the general public is another major challenge to public relations. It is not a one-way traffic. It is not enough to just communicate the desires or policies of government to the public and get feedbacks. Like we know, individuals differ in their reasoning, in their opinion, and in their expectations of certain aspects from the government. So because of this attitude, differentials in relationships, the indifference in even the attitude of people, like some people just don't care about what the government says or the extent to which the government communicates its policies to the public. Why some other ones approach it with like a bicycle attitude, there's no conformity in terms of maybe rules and regulations that are expected of the people, even their simple responsibility that they have to carry out and perform in the interest of the government. Sometimes they show this attitude of indifference towards them, and it's a major challenge to the functioning of government from the angle of its role of public relations and effective communications to the public as well. The lack of appreciation on the part of many public officials of the importance of their responsibility in the matter of public relations. This is also another aspect of the challenge or the obstacles of public relations. Even in most cases, those that are charged with the responsibility of carrying out this public communication aspect, this all important aspect of carrying everybody along, both the government and this environment or this populace, it's not effectively carried out by those that are charged with these duties. So to a large extent, there is lack of appreciation of the role of government. Play a very important role in explaining how public relation activities are carried out within the confines of the government. The lack of objective indices to measure the effectiveness of the methods used is another challenge. So the extent of the communication to the public is not always known because there's no indices to measure the effectiveness of the information that have been given out. Yes, there might be some elements of feedback that can guide an understanding of the information that have been passed across, but there is no indices for measuring the reception to which the public gives to this information from the government or from an organization or from the administrative circle of an organization and all. So in other words, the lack of objective indices to measure the effectiveness of the methods used is one of the obstacles of public relations. Also, the limited funds available for public relation activities and the consequent necessity of foregoing professional and technical assistance. You know, in this part of the world, there is always the challenge of funding public interest or public views and effective communication of the interests or programs of government or organizations to the public. So because of this lack of funding, it is difficult to measure the extent to which the impact of this public relations activities can be measured. And as such, it tends to retard professionalism and even as technical assistance that ordinarily should fine-tune the functioning of government within the confines of its operationalities. The difficulty of maintaining impartiality also is another challenge, ranging from the fact that being neutral in terms of communicating government interest to the public and communicating public interest to the government is a difficult challenge to public relations. There are organizations and heads of organizations that are charged with these issues of public relations, and in most times they tend to play certain lip services or tends to massage the ego of the government or the persons in power and not effectively communicate the desires of the people as it is in real terms. So they tend to play more of the role of sycophants and opinion or interest massagers to those that are in public positions. So in other words, they do not necessarily communicate effectively what is obtainable out there. So there must be at all times the issues of speaking the truth to power and the interest of the people must be communicated to government when one plays effective role in real public relations. The difficulty of persuading the public that public relations devices are not necessarily propaganda is another challenge, ranging from the fact that, you know, like we said earlier, propaganda tends to project an interest above other considerations, and most times are deceitful or they are self-serving or selfish in nature. But public relation is premised on facts. So, you know, in a lot of cases, it is difficult to communicate in actual terms, government policies that will not be misconstrued as propaganda, because we tend to have faced a lot of maladministration and governance in this part of the world. So even when the government is communicating in real terms and in real facts, it is often misconstrued as propaganda, and people attach some level of indifference and issues of disaffection to what is communicated from the government realm to the public. Then the tendency to interpret all government policies as propaganda is a major challenge and an obstacle to public relations. So having said that, we'll be looking at public employees organization. It goes without saying that strength lies in the organization. This is specifically true for those who earn their living by providing services under a private or state organization. Employees, unions, has become a vital part of personnel organization. It is being increasingly realized that if the employees do not organize themselves into an association, it would be difficult for them to get better working conditions and improve their lot thereby. So in other words, within the confines of the whole discussion of public relations, there's also the aspect of personnel or public employees organization. And there's also the aspect of trade union organizations that are all built into the functioning of an organization and these administrative tendencies. And the public employees organization tends to look more at the organizations that or associations that public service servants tends to form to improve the working conditions and make better demands of their welfare conditions from the government in power. So having said that, professional associations versus unions will be looked at. Public employees associations are of two types: professional associations and trade unions. Professional associations together for exchange of information and experience and for the advancement of their profession. These associations are, broadly speaking, formed by the higher categories of government employees, such as administrative, executive, and professional officials and scientists. So if you look at this closely, you understand that there is a difference between professional associations and trade unions. The professionals tend to focus or have some level of expertise in certain aspects that are very relevant, and their roles cannot be emphasized when one talks about the functionality of government. Same also with issues of trade union. They are established to influence the decisions of government on certain aspects. So we say trade unions, on the other hand, are generally formed by the employees of subordinate public services. Their avowed objective is to seek to improve the wages and other conditions of service of their members. If their demands are not considered to, they do not hesitate to resort to strike. We have seen a lot of this within the confines of the Nigerian system, ranging from the aspect of education to labor congresses and labor unions of various organizations, medical associations and all that, and how they make their various demands. And when those demands are not met, there is always the resolve to industrial actions. And as such, government activities are disrupted and in most cases distorted until their interests and their views and their demands are met. So having said that, the relevance of these organizations cannot be overemphasized. And the objective of association is also looked at here. And we say that their main objectives are to promote personal acquaintance among individuals with common interests and problems. Secondly, to promote research in the profession by organizing periodic conferences for the exchange of ideas and experience so that the best ideas may be selected and applied in order to improve the efficiency of administration. Thirdly, to give their suggestion for reforms and improvements. And again, to issue literature for the spread of the latest information relating to their fields. If you look at this closely, public relations, public employees, trade unions, and professional associations are built around getting certain aspects to function both in their individual interest and in the overall good of the system. First is the fact that they are set up to promote personal acquaintances among individuals with common interests and problems. So when you form a trade union, in as much as they are set up to influence government policies, they make special demands on how to better the conditions of service of their employees and their members. And that to a large extent tends to promote a better understanding and commitment of personnel within the confines of an organization. Also, to promote research in the profession by organizing periodic conferences for the exchange of ideas and experience so that the best idea may be selected and applied in order to improve the efficiency of administration. So this tends to buttress the point of self-development and improved condition of service and more detailed input into how the system functions and operates, both within the confines of itself and its external environment. So it tends to showcase an improved condition of service and service delivery as well, due to exposure to conferences and seminars and workshops and researches as well that can help to ensure smooth and effective running of government. To give their suggestions for reforms and improvement. Through this research and the new ideas coming into play, there is always better improvement of the condition of service, both on the part of the individual and the government, and on the part of the environment which they operate as well. So, having said that, Public Employees Union, the following are the various objectives of the unions: to exert pressure on the authorities that the merit rule should be adopted, and under no circumstances should the spoil system be a substitute for the merit principle. This indirectly helps in effecting efficiency and economy of administration. Remember, in one of our classes, we discussed the issues of the spoil system and the merit system, where we say the spoil system revolves around people or political parties gaining from winning power and having their own members man position of authority as a reward system for being members of a particular political party. So the spoil system, to a large extent, tends to look at how benefits accrue to an individual for roles played in terms of bringing certain individuals to power or gaining political power for their political parties. And that negates the principles of merit when one looks at the issues of administration. So it does not necessarily guarantee that the best hands will be in power when one operates the spoil system. But under the merit system, it is always square pegs for square holes. And the right caliber of persons with the right qualification and the right educational standing always attain positions of authority. But that is at variance with the spoil system. So what this is saying is, under the employees union, they tend to negate the circumstances that promotes the spoil system, but rather upholds the principles of merit in the conduct of affairs. So this indirectly helps in effecting efficiency and economy of administration. So when they guarantee that the right caliber of persons and then the right persons with the requisite knowledge and expertise to manage position is guaranteed, they tend to be efficiency and better economy of administration within the system in its entirety. So also to strive for the clarification of service on the basis of the kind of work to be done by the incumbent of a particular office. Listen to that again: to strive for the classification of service on the basis of the kind of work to be done by the incumbent on a particular office. So what this is trying to say is that due to the fact that the employees union guarantees the right persons being in the right position, they tend to classify them according to the services that they render in the interest of the kind of work they do and in the interest of the public as well. So that to a large extent tends to guarantee efficiency and effectiveness of the duties that they perform within the confines of an organization. Then also to emphasize that compensation for the work should be adjusted with the nature of the work. So there's always a reward system for every role played within an organization. To stress that the minimum low wage should be strictly followed. To stress that the minimum low wage should be strictly followed. In other words, what is agreed upon as remuneration or as salaries or wages for employees of an organization must be strictly adhered to. And that, to a large extent, is one of the roles of employees union. To see that the service records are properly maintained and the promotions are made mainly on that basis. So in other words, under the principles of the merit system, this is very objective and tends to guide the principles of how organizations function and the effective roles that they play. In other words, it negates the spoil system that anybody can be brought to man an authority or a position without necessarily having the requisite knowledge. But what this employees union tend to guarantee is the merit system, and promotions for employees are guaranteed according to the records of service that they have put in and the number of years that one is deemed to be qualified for promotion. To insist on the adoption of a proper retirement plan so that the retired man does not feel frustrated after retirement. So they protect the interest of their employees or their members to the extent of guaranteeing a safe retirement plan for them, so that when they exit the service, they can easily still have something to fall back to. To bring pressure to bear on the government for improvement of pay and conditions of service. These are all very high points that revolves around the extent of the functionality of employees union. To provide a forum for the employee for exchange of ideas and experiences through seminars, workshops, and programs that are made available for their members. Excuse me. To foster the growth of the spirit of cooperation and group consciousness among the members is another aspect of the importance of employees' union. So having said all that, there are advantages of unions, and they range from the fact that unions create the spirit of cooperation in the service, cooperation among members, amongst employees, and even the extent of their relationship with the external environment is guaranteed under the protection of employees' union. They build up the morale of the employees as they feel strengthened in a collective capacity. Going to the roles that they play and the extent of their cooperation and the extent of the interpersonal relationship that goes on both within the organization and the staff of the organization and its external environment, they tend to be this collective feeling and strengthened relationship that takes place that tends to smoothen the relationship within the course of the job and even upon retirement. They prevent abuses on the part of government, directing heads and safeguarding the merit system. So employees union or public relations unions tends to guide the government from abuse of power. And that is why in some cases, you see that there is conflict between the spoil system and the merit system. Some persons can be brought into government and they do not have the requisite knowledge or the expertise to man the position that they are brought in. But under this idea of constant regulation and supervision by employees union, they tend to guide the government from making decisions that can have a negative consequences. And as such, they safeguard the merit system from time to time. They develop a sense of participation in the personnel management through the unions. They feel that their voice is being counted or heard. So due to the role and the relevance of their positions as well, there is the feeling of participation and involvement in the governance of the country and in how organizations function. So to a large extent, because they know that their voices are heard and counted, they tend to be attached to the roles of the government and then the programs of the government in terms of having carried along or project the interest of the government amongst the populace as well. So in terms of a summary of the advantages, we said that employees union create the spirit of cooperation in the service. They build up the morale of employees as they feel strengthened in collective capacity. They prevent abuses on the part of government, directing heads and safeguarding the merit system. They develop a sense of participation in the personnel management through the unions. They feel their voice is being counted or heard. So having said all that, it is easy for one to understand the dichotomy that exists between public relations, publicity, propaganda, public employees union, trade unions, and professional associations, as they all work together in conformity with government principles and programs in the overall interest of the populace. So having said that, in conclusion, the right of all employees of the federal government to join and participate in activities of employees organization and to seek to improve working conditions and the resolutions of grievances should be recognized by the management officials at all levels in all departments and agencies. In other words, the role of these employees organizations cannot be overemphasized when one looks at the issues of effective communication between the government and its external environment, and even within the confines of the organizations in themselves. The participation of federal employees in the formulation and implementation of employee policies and procedures affecting them contributes to the effective conduct of public business. This participation should include consultations by responsible officials with the representatives of employees and federal employees organizations. So having said all that, we have come to the end of this lecture, and the relevance of public relations in the conduct of the affairs of government, both at the state or federating units, cannot be overemphasized. Even within the confines of public organizations and businesses or private organizations, the role of effective communication within the organization and external environment cannot be overemphasized. And note the difference from public relations to propaganda to publicity and to formation of employees unions within an organization, and the relevance of their various roles in terms of the sustainability of the system is equally relevant in the overall scheme of things. So having said that, we have come to the end of this lecture, and I urge us to pass the information across so that other persons can learn and then understand what we do in this course. So thank you for this opportunity, and we meet in the next class.